Welcome back to Advanced Java. In this video, I'd like to give a very brief overview of the Unit 1 Labs 4, 5, and 6, and I'm rolling those all together because they're very similar. Let's get started with the first lab, or Lab 4. So one thing you'll notice as you get into Lab 4 that's different than a couple of the previous labs is that there are actually some steps here, and we're telling you what exactly you need to build. There are still unit tests though, so you kind of have the option of following the steps, or you could start off just doing strict TDD, test-driven development, by running the tests, finding that first broken test, writing enough code to pass that test, building, and then running the test again. So you can use that process, or you can kind of combine these together and maybe start following the instructions. Write a bit of code. You know, here you're going to need a main method and the name of the class is Lab 4. So you could use this to kind of jumpstart things a little bit and then write a bit of code and then run the test. I would not recommend writing the entire class and then running the test for the first time. You want to be very iterative by writing a bit of code, compiling it, making sure you don't have any errors in those first couple of lines of code you wrote, run the tests, write a little bit more code, make sure it compiles. So build often to make sure that you aren't continuing maybe to replicate an error in your code as you go by running a lot of code. So the goal for this lab is really to read a file. Read in a file and then write what is in that file back to the command line. So we should see that written back out. So that information is in here. Open the input file, loop through the lines of the input file, write each line out. So read a line, write a line out to the command line, read another line, write it out to the command line. Once you have the 4 unit tests passing, then you want to make sure that the lab actually works. So not just that the unit tests pass. And to run this, you'll use our Run Labs 1 script, passing in the name of the class you want to run, just like always, and then the name of the file that you want to read. So this could be input.txt, it could be mystuff.doc, whatever that is. So make sure that you don't have, say, an input file name hard-coded anywhere in your application. Your application should read whatever file gets passed in from the command line run here. All right, so that's the input. Next one is Lab 5, which is the output. So in this case, the goal is to run this class, type something at the command line, and that something that you type at the command line should get written to this new file. So the idea, again, is you've got unit tests to pass. You should write a bit of code, run the test, write a bit of code, run the test, making sure that you build every time you make a change to the code. You'll have 2 parameters coming in this case, so that's a little bit different than the last one. One is the name of the file that you are going to be writing to, and your application should create that file automatically, so you don't have to have this existing already. And then some text is the word then that will get written into the file. So name of the file and what should be written into that file. Again, make sure that the tests are all passing, and then verify that you can run the class. So you'll pass in a file name and that message, and then verify that the file was actually written with that message. Verify your error handling too. So while there are unit tests for that, you should also be making sure when you run at the command line that your error handling is working. So what if you don't pass in the right number of command line arguments? Do you see that message coming back about entering 2 arguments on the command line? You should be seeing that. All right, then on to Lab 6. So Lab 6 now takes Lab 4 and 5 and kind of rolls them together. The goal behind this lab is that you essentially copy a file, make a copy of a file. So you'll take a file that already exists, read it in, and then create an output file that is a copy of that first file. So you should end up, after your lab runs, with 2 files that are identical in terms of their content. The file names will be different, but the content inside of those files should be the same. So this is a way to make a copy. That's what it's doing. So read in a file, and rather than writing that stuff back to the command line, you're going to write it into its own file. So these 3 labs, and especially lab 6, really gets you ready for the project, where the goal of that project is to read in a file, do some stuff with that, do some analysis on that file, and then write out some additional files, some reports about that. So you're not just in the project dumping out the same file like we are here, but this is getting us another step closer to meeting the requirements of that project. Now, something that I want you to realize about all 3 of these labs, is that the unit tests behind the scenes are going to be creating a file and passing that into your program. You don't have to have that file created anywhere for the unit tests to work. The unit tests are going to do that work for you. So they're going to create a file and send it to your program, and then a file will be written out. The test will make sure that that output file was created correctly, and then it will delete those. So you won't see these showing up anywhere. Maybe you'd see a flash in the browser, file browser if you were watching, but the tests run pretty quickly. So just keep that in mind. Again, you should not be hard coding the name of any files into these 3 labs. Lab 4, 5, and 6 and your project should not have hard-coded file names in them in terms of the input file. Output file in the project, we will be hard-coding something, but for the labs here, you will not be hard-coding those file names. If you have questions about that, you want to make sure you're headed down the right path, please ask before you hard-code something in. All right, that's it for now. I'm looking forward to seeing your labs from this week. We'll see you soon.